So at the end of 1.2, we used this example with our production possibilities curve. We said, suppose we have our country or whatever, and we can produce two different items. We can produce butter or we could produce chairs. And obviously that blue line that you see represents all the different possible combinations of what we could produce. If we used our resources efficiently, we could produce anywhere on point A, B, C, D, E, F, or anywhere else in between. Now, if you remember, we said, well, what would happen if we had a point something like this, like a point that was outside of our production possibilities curve? Well, if you remember, we had said that any point that sits outside of our production possibilities curve is impossible because we don't have enough resources to get to that point. That blue line already represents us using all those resources to the best of our ability. However, what we're going to find out is that over time, there is a way to achieve that. Because I had told you before that one of the rules we were going to play by is that all of our resources were fixed, both in quantity and quality. Well, what happens when those become unfixed? Well, what we see is that we could have our economy or our country experience economic growth. And what that would look like is that our ability to produce either butter or chairs would increase. And what we would see then is our production possibilities curve shift outward, where we're now able to achieve points that we weren't able to achieve before. So economic growth, just a quick definition, is just whenever a nation's total output of goods and services increases over time. If you think about it, like think about the United States. The United States today can produce so much more than we could have 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Why? Well, because our economy has grown. The total output of goods and services that we can make over time has increased. We'll get into this more in Unit 4, but we call this our GDP, and our GDP has grown over time. And we see this reflected in a shift outward of our production possibilities curve, because now, if you notice, points that before were efficient now fall within our production possibilities curve, and points that before were impossible, some of those now fall along our production possibilities curve. So we can do more than we could before. Now, whenever a nation becomes more productive and we see this outward shift, we want to understand, how does this happen? Well, what we say is that can happen in one of three ways. One of the ways is that we see an increase in the quantity of our resources, the amount of the resources that we have. We could see an increase in the quality of our resources, or we could see an increase in technology. So, what exactly might this look like? Well, whenever we see an increase in the quantity of resources, that would mean that the amount of the resources we have available to us has gone up. So maybe we have more natural resources, and now with more natural resources, we can make more things. Or maybe that we have more labor now. We have more people that are in our workforce, and as we have more people in our workforce, what that allows us to do is be more productive because we have more people who can work more and make more stuff. Or maybe we have an increase in the quantity of our capital. Remember, capital is like those tools and machineries, and we see this happen over time. Whenever economies grow, they build more factories and they expand their production, and they're able to produce more. So therefore, that increase in the quantity of their resources has now changed, and they're able to produce more and produce at points that they couldn't before. Maybe we also see an increase in the quality of our resources. Maybe it's the quality of our natural resources, or maybe the quality of our labor. Like, think about it. Do you remember your very first day when you showed up to your job? Right? You might have been absolutely lost. Like, you had no idea what was going on. However, over time, as you've been trained, as you've learned about the job, what we see is that you, as labor, the quality of you as a labor has increased through your training and through your education, and you're now able to be more productive. Also, we have an increase in the quality of our capital, right? The types of machines, maybe we buy newer machines that they just work better. But this also ties in with number 3, is just an increase in technology. And this is probably the one that we see being the most influential in the growth of economies, is that as we see over time, technology has changed, technology has increased, which allows us to be more productive. I mean, think about all the machines that we have now that are automated, and all these automated processes that allow us to produce so much more efficiently and be so much more productive than we could before. Right? Before, on our production possibilities curve, there was a lot of points that we couldn't achieve, but now as our technology has increased, those points that before were impossible, they've now become possible. Now, if you notice, we refer to these as supply factors of economic growth. And that's one key thing I want us to be aware of, because we call these supply factors because they impact our supply, which is just the amount of products that we can produce. And so whenever I ask you about the supply factors of economic growth, you'll be thinking about these three things: an increase in the quantity of our resources, an increase in the quality of our resources, or an increase in technology.